This is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Magician's Guild by Trudy Canavan, brought to you by Ashleigh. Chapters 21 through 24. In these chapters, I still have not entirely figured out what Fergun's plan is for Cery, and I am dying for Daniel to follow Fergun, and I'm irritated that he's deciding to mind his own business. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Natasha. And yeah, I decided that I am, like, one of my worst fears is being taken prisoner and kept somewhere without, like, knowing anything about why I'm there, when I will be let go, anything like this. Another story that I was reading and a show that I've been watching, all at the same time had people that were suddenly, like, taken captive and kept in somebody's basement or spare room or something. And I cannot express the anxiety level I get watching or reading about this sort of situation. And the fact that Cery's dealing with magicians as well, this situation would be quite bad enough on top, like, without having to deal with the fact that there's magic on top of just being captured by an enemy that you didn't even really know was your enemy. Like, he was suspicious of the magicians, but they really made him feel like everything was going to be okay. And for them to get the drop on him the way they did just seems really mean. And I don't mean they're mean, because obviously this is just Fergun doing what Fergun go do. But yeah, I am really, really, like, worried just because I know that, I think it might have been Martin last week that said maybe to use him for blackmail. And that's also Cery's theory, but based on what Fergun is saying to Sonea in this section, I can't figure out how that blackmail would even work, because I'm not saying that I trust completely what he's saying to Sonea either, and I'll get to that whole thing, but it's just really, like, confusing to me, the seemingly conflicting pieces of this puzzle, and I don't really understand what his plan is entirely, and I can't decide if it's because I'm being dense, or if it's because the author is intentionally confusing me a little bit. So, let's talk about what happens next. We have the end of chapter 20 ended with Cery being thrown into that dungeon, and chapter 21 starts with Lord Rothan. And Tania is getting Tanya? I'm going to say Tanya. Because Tania and Sonea is just silly. And it might be Sonia, but I don't think so. So we'll say Tanya and Sonea. They are getting to know each other. And there's a really nice, like, moment of Sonea sending thoughts towards Rothan and them having this, like, little conversation. And him having to inform her that it's considered kind of rude to talk about somebody or to have a conversation in your head with somebody with the other person in the room not being able to join in with, so, like, basically in the presence of a person who is not also capable of doing this. I like this scene for a couple reasons. One, that we know now that she's so capable of sending thoughts that easily that it's like this casual thing now. Two, that we learn about, like, the etiquette surrounding doing this. And three, that I think, is it now, or I'm trying to find exactly, he talks about the fact that, this is when we get the info on exactly how this works. And essentially, you cannot hide what you're sending. It's just up to the other magicians who are in the vicinity to mind their own business and recognize that if you're not calling out to them, that this has nothing to do with them, which one might think would be really difficult to like believe that magicians are going to mind their own business, especially knowing what we know about Fergun. But what it is for me is the idea that everybody is busy and doing shit all the time, and there must be sendings happening a lot. And you just get so that it all like, it's probably a lot of it is just going to be really basic pedestrian daily shit. So it might seem really intriguing to you initially, and then you start to realize that it's like trying to listen to like several radio stations, or, you know, just the amount of attention and energy that it would take will not seem worth it after a while. And I recently covered for the book club Dead Until Dark, which is the first book in the Sookie Stackhouse series. And it's because of reading that reading that for the first time, I decided to revisit the True Blood show, which goes way off the rails, but the first season is really good. And I was watching, and they do such a great job of showing how overwhelmed Sookie gets hearing people's thoughts all the time, because she can't really she can block it out, but it does take energy to do that. And it's a constant like surround sound of lots of different people. So that's sort of what I imagine. I don't think that people are sending constantly the same way that they're thinking. It's not a direct comparison, but just the idea, like for me, my instinct is to go, oh, really? They're going to mind their own business and not listen to other people's conversations? Give me a break. But then I realized that it would just, you know, they do study there. They do dedicate themselves to certain things there. And it's not any different than being in a restaurant and trying to like listen to everybody else's conversation but your own. So yeah, I found this to be really interesting. And the fact that also regular people can also send to each other, but they need to be touching. If you are touching and you are magicians, it's just much easier. But you can do it if you aren't a magician, which I found really, really surprising. And he says that we often forget that magicians aren't the only people who can hear us. Not all children found to have magical potential enter the guild. If the child is the eldest brother, for example, he may be of more value to his family as their heir. There are laws in most lands that discourage magicians from involving themselves in politics. A magician cannot become king, for example. For this reason, it is not wise to have a magician as the head of the family. Mental communication is an ability that comes with magical potential. Sometimes, though it is very rare, an individual who did not become a magician will find their ability to communicate mentally has developed naturally. These people can be taught how to truth read, which can be a very useful skill. And truth reading, I was a little disappointed to learn, cannot be done with an unwilling recipient. So it's only useful when somebody wants to show another person what they have seen or heard. We have a law in the guild concerning accusations. If somebody accuses the magician of falsehood or of committing a crime, they must allow themselves to be truth-read or withdraw their accusation. That doesn't seem fair, Sonea said. It was the magician who did something wrong. Yes, but it does prevent false accusations. The accused, whether magician or not, can easily prevent a truth read. There is one exception, however. A few years ago, a man suspected of committing particularly malicious murders was brought to the guild. The High Lord, our leader, read his mind and confirmed his guilt. It takes great skill to get past the blocks in an unwilling mind. A Karen is the only one of us who has managed it, though I have heard that magicians in the past could do it. He is an extraordinary man. Okay, a couple things here. One, I am suspecting that a Karen is doing some shady shit, based on the fact that I believe it was him. We see him getting undressed out of like bloody clothing and doing something to absorb the strength from one of his underlings. So I don't trust a Karen to say that he was able to do something that nobody else is really able to do and read the mind of an unwilling person. I just feel like that's just too much responsibility or trust to lay in the hands of one person. And it kind of alarms me that he is so trusted by everybody that just his assurances of what he saw in this person's mind is enough to convict somebody. So I'm just side-eyeing that whole procedure, and I don't really feel great about it, and I'm just going to leave it there. So, yeah, Rothan just talks a little bit longer about how that works, and this is when he brings up the fact that, because Sonea is like, well, couldn't he just put stuff behind doors? And he says something like, well, you know that it can be a little bit difficult. And she realizes by the way that he said it, that he has seen some stuff that she wanted to be kept personal and private. And he finally just decides to be straightforward with her. He's really good about assessing a situation accurately, and deciding a course for handling it really readily, and then immediately following through on what he has decided. Like, this is a dude who does not waste any time. And frankly, it's really nice to read. Like, it's sort of refreshing in light of how many different characters, and not specifically in this book, but just in general, think about how, well, I really should do this. And then like fucking 4 chapters will pass and they still haven't done what they claim was this like really urgent thing that they needed to take care of. So I like that he thinks about this and thinks about the way things are working with Sonea, or not working, as the case may be, and decides how he's going to handle it. And the very next thing is him doing that. Linda's asking, any thoughts on what shady shit or just general shadiness? I have no idea. The only thing that I know for sure is that he's like spying out in the streets dressed like a beggar. And I don't have any clue what he's spying for, why he's killing anybody. I got nothing. I just don't know anything about the guy, you know. So when he talks to her, he says, you know, I've seen things you wanted to keep concealed, and pretending I haven't isn't helping at all. For a start, I expected you to search my rooms. I would have if I was in your position. It doesn't bother me. Forget about it. Secondly, your friends and family are in no danger from us. You worry that we'll threaten to harm them if you do not agree to cooperate. We won't, Sonea. To do so would break the king's law. But you worry anyway. You have little reason to believe we respect the king's law. Little reason to trust us. Which brings me to your third fear, that I'll discover your plans to escape. You don't need to make such plans. We won't force you to stay if you don't want to. Once you have learned control, you can leave or stay as you choose. Becoming a magician involves a vow that we must all make, a vow which holds us for our entire life. It is not a vow to be made unwillingly. So this is when he kind of is a little bit like gymnastics with words here when he says, but I must warn you, without training, you will not be able to use your powers. What you were able to do before will no longer be possible. You will not be able to use magic at all. You will be of no use to the thieves. To his surprise, she looked relieved. So this is really this is the part where he really has a lot of problem understanding that she doesn't want to be a thief. She doesn't want to be a member of the guild. So what you're telling me, Sonea, is that you just want to be a regular old ordinary poor person. And that obviously had not even entered his mind as an option. There is absolutely no reason that he can think of that anybody would want that. So it was amusing to me to read his reaction and just be like, so you just want to go back to the slums? Seriously? That's it? Okay. Because that's my exact reaction. Girl, you have the opportunity to make some changes, and that doesn't necessarily have to come with... I don't know. I feel like she's so single-minded about how worried she is that everybody who lives in the slums, the dwells, that's the word I'm looking for, that they are all going to see her as a traitor for becoming a magician, that all she can think is what that means in terms of like their opinion of her and their reputation. And she's not thinking about how she could change the magician's reputation, or how she could use her power to do some good, the kind of good that she was expressing frustration with Rothan for not actually taking on himself. It just doesn't seem to have occurred to her that she would have the freedom, I think, to do any of that stuff. I think that's really what it comes down to, is that any sort of association with the magicians that she's imagining winds up as a like the only potential there is whatever they order her to do, and that they will be like constantly watching her, and she will not be allowed to take on the causes that she wants. And I think that is the thing that Rothan really is like low-key aware of and trying to break past by showing her around the campus and everything, as he does later, is that he can tell she has an idea of what this all means that is still skewed by what she thinks the magicians are. And unfortunately, Fergun seems really like good at zeroing in on what those fears are also. So that's why his deal later is like really frustrating. Martin says, well, it would be like if someone asked you to be a senator. Sure, you get money, influence, and privilege even to do good, but everyone would hate you. I mean, yeah, but this is like you could... It's the option of, if I, didn't have a job or a place to live, and somebody offered, like, they don't have a fucking home, and somebody offered me this job that had power and influence and the ability to help people, maybe people would hate me, but I would still be able to do good, and I would also have a fucking place to, like, offer my family to live, and food, and whatever. So, while I get, like, her reticence on this, it doesn't feel like she's completely thought this through. Or it's a combo of, like, not exactly thinking it through and not thinking that any other options are really out there for her. So, yeah, I feel really like I want someone outside of this situation to, like, talk her through this. Somebody who isn't a magician, somebody who knows what goes on with the magicians, though, and isn't, like, coming at her with an agenda that she can point to and be like, well, here's why I can't trust you. So, this is when he starts to teach her control, finally. And I like that when he asks her to show him the room where her power is, that we find out that the building and the door have changed colors and changed appearance. Like, this does evolve over time. Cery, for his part, and I'm just going to talk about Cery all in one shot. Cery is trying to figure out a way to bust out of his jail, his dungeon, prison, whatever. And he has all of these lockpicks on him. It turns out he has a lot of shit on him, and Fergun just did not search him. Which, when you see later that Fergun does search him and how easy it is for him to do, the fact that he didn't think to do that right away is kind of hilarious. Like, this guy has clearly not done this sort of thing before, or if he did, he's done it badly. So he tries to use lockpicks, but all of the picks that he can find get stuck fast, and he cannot move them and get them out. So when Fergun shows up to give him some food, he finds all the lockpicks and is just like, oh my god, really? Searches him again. And he finds the knives that Cery had on him still and takes those along with other lockpicking equipment and a few other things. Luckily, Cery has so much shit on him that Fergun walks away with 2 handfuls of stuff and thinks he's got everything, and he still doesn't have everything. But Fergun is like bringing him food, bringing him blankets, kind of like trying to act like he's so benevolent despite doing this and never telling Cery why. And Cery finally tries to attack him and sneak up on him at one point. And Fergun, of course, immediately is able to like take him down. I think Cery breaks his leg or his arm, and Fergun actually heals him, which I appreciated that touch, that he's not so evil that he'd just leave this kid damaged and suffering in his cell. But it's also probably in his best interest that this kid not be like in total pain, you know, like this breaks can get infected. The kid could get sick. He could begin to scream and people would hear. So I don't want to give him too much credit for that. But Fergun is such a bizarre, like, all right. Well, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here because we haven't talked about his conversation with Sonea. But we have like the conversation that Rothan has with Daniel a little bit later. And Daniel is like, I don't know if you're aware of what everybody's saying about you. That she has probably learned control in a few days and you've been keeping her locked away so Fergun can't see her. And that she's like super duper powerful and you're just kind of like guarding her and sort of hoarding her in a way. There's a lot of like gossip mill in this guild. And I like that Rothan specifically makes the effort to mention how she is really strong, because Daniel realizes that if people know she's strong, they will favor Rothan as her guardian over Fergun. Vinara smiled. Of course, strength is not the ultimate test of a novice. What talents has she displayed? Rothan pursed his lips. Her visualization ability is good. That will help her in most disciplines. Her memory is good, too. I've found her to be an intelligent and attentive student. Has she tried to use her powers at all? Asked a red-robed magician. Not since she arrived. She understands the danger very well. So, they're in the middle of this, and Daniel gets summoned off by the administrator, Lorlan. And this, God. Okay. Daniel saw that Fergun had reached the crowd. A familiar voice joined the chatter, and a few faces turned in the warrior's direction. Excuse me all, Rothan said. I must speak to Administrator Lorlan. He inclined his head politely, then nudged Daniel in Lorlan's direction. Looking back, Daniel's gaze locked with Fergun's for a moment. The warrior's lips were stretched in a satisfied smile. So, question. Satisfied smile. Why? Because I feel like what Rothan is unconsciously doing by not letting Fergun see her is playing right into this narrative that he's trying to hoard her. And that is exactly what Fergun wants, right? Am I wrong here? Excuse me while I'm trying to unwind this thing. I went and did plasma today, and they put this bandage on so tight that my arm is starting to fall asleep now. So I feel like Rothan is just such a sweet, innocent cinnamon roll in so many ways. Like, he is really good at understanding human nature in some capacities, but in terms of getting how devious Fergun is, he is just completely clueless. And so he is really falling right into this pretty simple trap, to be honest, that Fergun has laid for him. So they go and speak to Lorlan. And when he says that it's going to take it could take several weeks to get her to learn control, Lorlan is basically like, listen, bruh, I'm not saying you're lying that it's going to take that long, but I'm saying you do not have that kind of time. You get 2 weeks, and that's about it. And even that 2 weeks, I'm going to need to see her before that 2 weeks is up. Like, we can't be having her stay here for a month in the magician's quarters, no less, where she is a constant low-key danger to everybody, and just have you take your sweet time. That's not how this is going to play. Also, he says, have you told her that we would have to block her powers? Because Rothan tells him I told her that she could leave if she really wanted to. Not yet, Rothan frowned. I don't think she will care. I warned her that she would not be able to use her powers, and she seemed pleased by the prospect. I believe she would rather be rid of them. Lorelin nodded. I am not surprised. She has only experienced magic as an uncontrollable, destructive force. Perhaps if you taught her a few useful tricks, she would start to like it better. Rothan frowned. She should not use her power until she has full control of it, and when she has control, she will expect us to let her to go. She does not know the difference between a control lesson and a magic lesson, Daniel pointed out. Just let the instruction evolve from control into magic usage. That will also give you more time to convince her to stay. Not much, Lorelin added. Fergun doesn't need to know exactly when she achieved control, but you won't fool him for long. You might gain an extra week. So, that's the deal that they have made up. And meanwhile, Sonea is... she gets visited by Fergun. Fergun, this is so annoying, because he's just not horrible to her. And I have never seen a single side of him that hasn't been awful. So seeing the way that he can turn it off is really alarming. Anybody who has dealt with somebody who is sociopathic or abusive knows this kind of deal. That there are people out there who are basically evil in a way, or at the very least so deeply selfish that it can look evil, who are still able to charm the fucking socks off whoever they speak to, and know somehow exactly the right thing to say and the right way to be, because they are so perceptive. The thing is, they never use that for good. And that's exactly what's happening here, but it's the first time that I've gotten to see this. So Sonea is pretty good at, like, seeing through bullshit after, she's had not an easy life. And he is so good at putting this face on for her and telling her exactly as much of the truth as works in his favor, that it really fucks you up as you read it to see how deftly he's manipulating her. So we get the description here. He was much younger than Rothan, she noted, and quite attractive. His hair was pale and neatly combed, and his facial features were both fine and strong. She knew she had seen him before, but she couldn't remember where. Yeah, because he's the guy that you bash with a rock, girl. But, whatever. So yeah, that was another thing, is that I keep forgetting that Fergun is supposed to be younger and that he is attractive. I feel like somebody at one point mentioned that they picture Fergun as being like grown-up Malfoy. And I forgot that until that moment when his hair is described as pale. Because for some reason, I keep picturing the actor who plays Mr. Norrell. I don't know if any of you have seen Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, the BBC miniseries, but if you haven't, I highly recommend it. The audiobook is fucking great, and it's like 40 hours long, so it's a ton of listening, but it's super good and worth every chapter. And the guy who plays Norrell is really good at being this, like, prissy is kind of the word I want, and also just, like, sort of affected and whiny dude who's like, that's sort of how I picture Fergun being when it comes to like daily interactions, is that he's just really like particular about everything. And I don't have a lot to like base that on, except for the fact that he comes from a rich family and was maybe spoiled. So then, when she says, I don't want to join the guild, he blinks. You don't want to join the guild? No. He nodded slowly and leaned back in his chair. For a while he was silent and thoughtful, then his gaze shifted to hers again. May I ask why? Sonea considered him carefully. Rothan had told her many of the magicians would be surprised when she refused the guild's offer. I want to go home, she told him. He nodded again. Do you know that the guild does not allow magicians to exist outside its influence? Yes, she replied. Everybody knows that. So you know they will not just let you walk out of here. I won't be able to use my powers, so I won't be a threat. So Rothan has told you the guild will block your powers? Sonea frowned. Block her powers? He nodded slowly. No, I thought not. He is only telling you part of the truth. The higher magicians will cage your powers within you so that you cannot reach for them. It's not a pleasant procedure, not at all, and the cage will be there for the rest of your life. You see, even though you will not know how to use your powers, there is always a chance you will discover how to use them yourself, or encounter a rogue magician willing to teach you, though that is highly unlikely. By law, the guild must make sure you cannot use magic, even if you had all the help you needed. So, he tells her that it's not a pleasant procedure. Laurelin tells her later that it will not hurt her at all. There just might be some, discomfort when she tries to reach for her power automatically, if she ever does, and that it's not painful, it's just sort of like a tug of resistance. So I'm hopeful that Laurelin is the one telling her the truth on this, but it's difficult to know, and obviously Sonea can't be sure either. So then he tells her the thing. He wants there to be a hearing about who's going to be her guardian. She will ask him to be her guardian. And then if your powers will be blocked, and if you refuse to join the guild, your powers will be blocked and you'll be sent back to the slums. If you agree to stay, however, and I win your guardianship, I can help you. You'll simply vanish one day. You can go back to the slums if you want. I'll teach you how to make your magic undetectable, and your powers will not be blocked. They will hunt for you at first, but if you are smart, they won't find you this time. And that she points out that he'd be breaking the guild's laws. And then he tells her this story. I don't like to see people forced to be what they don't want to be. And tells her about how he wanted to be a warrior and a swordsman, but that his family found out that he had magic skills. And despite the fact that he doesn't have huge power, they sent him to this school and basically clipped the potential off for him to do this other thing that he actually wanted. And he's stuck doing this thing that he's not even really that good at. It's just really prestigious for his family, for him to be involved. And that he has done his best to add sword fighting to the repertoire of the magicians, even though most of them don't really approve of it, in an effort to get any bit of the life that he had hoped for. And that's why he's helping her do what she wants to do, which is a very moving story, but I'm not entirely sure I believe it, and neither, thankfully, is Sonea. She does not fall for this hook, line, and sinker, I feel the need to remark, because, I've said a couple times how deftly he's handling her and manipulating her, and I don't want that to make it sound like she completely fell for it, because that's not true. She's smart enough to know that she needs to follow up on certain things. But he has sown that kernel of doubt in her mind. I don't even, that's not even the right way to say it, because that doubt has been there, and Rothan has been slowly siphoning it away and trying to make her feel like she can trust him. So it's all of a sudden the way that Fergun is phrasing things just brings it all back in. It reverses that siphon and sucks it back up into her system. And she's suddenly like, wait, what? Is everything that I was worried about with them lying to me actually true? So then he finishes, I will try to visit again soon, but you must have an answer for me. I may not have a third opportunity. I will. Looking at the door, he sighed. I had better go. It would do you no good if you found me with you. Moving to the door, he opened it a crack and peered out. Pausing only to give her one last grim smile, he slipped out. She could not see any reason for Fergun to lie to her, but she would check every claim he had made, the blocking of powers, guardianship, and his story of broken dreams. By questioning Rothan carefully, she might trick him into confirming much of what Fergun had said. But not tonight. She was too unnerved by the visit to put on a calm face if Rothan returned. Rising, she entered her bedroom and closed the door. So, this shows, like, the next chapter shows her and Rothan together, and him being able to tell that there's something going on with her, that she's, like, distracted and a little uneasy, and he's trying to figure out exactly when things are, going down, like, because she's worrying about meeting more of them, and he finally realizes that the fact that he has been sort of planning that and keeping it from her, that she senses it, which isn't that's not actually what she's upset about, but it's a good thing for him to latch onto. He thought about how long she had been locked in his rooms. It was easy to forget that his living quarters were a prison to her. She must be tired of her surroundings and was probably bored, which made it a good time to introduce her to Daniel. So Daniel comes in. He is a little intimidating to most people because of his height, but he does not intimidate Sonea at all. She recognizes immediately that this is the guy that she stabbed in the thigh, which I find endlessly amusing, that she knows who he is in that context right away. How are your lessons going? Daniel asked. Good, I think. What about you? Me? You're teaching Rothan's class, aren't you? Oh, yes, it's challenging. I haven't taught anyone before, so I almost feel as if I've got more to learn than the novices. So then they start talking about his experiments and everything. And they go and visit, and she gets to see, more of the whole, he has to go down first and tidy it up a little bit, which I really enjoy that detail because it's really relatable. And let's see, I'm trying to pick up exactly where they get in. There's space now, come down, he sends to Rothan. How many magicians live here? Over 80, he told her, and their families. So there are people other than magicians here? Yes, but only the spouses and children of magicians. No other relatives are allowed. If we had every relative of a magician live here, we would have to move the entire inner circle onto the grounds. What happens if when the children grow up? If they have magical potential, they usually join the guild. If they don't, they must leave, to live with relations in the city. Do any magicians live in the city? A few. It's discouraged. We're supposed to keep an eye on each other, remember, to make sure none of us get too deeply involved in politics or plot against the king. It's harder to do that if too many of us live outside the guild. Some are allowed to, because of many reasons, all unique to the individual: old age, illness. So then, once they get down, they visit Daniel's little workshop is the only thing I can think. Giant chemistry set. And yeah, he's got a lot going on in his quarters that apparently there's not a lot of space for everybody to do the shit that they want to do on the campus. So it is pretty common for the magicians to set up their experiments inside their rooms, which I found pretty surprising, to be honest. I feel like that's kind of dangerous, but I guess if you're trusting that they know what the fuck they're doing, you have to allow certain things, or else it's just going to crop up, against the rules anyway, more than likely. So he shows her, I think he has a map of the entire campus that he shows her, in neat writing of the guild's most famous architect, Lord Corrin. We are here in the magician's quarters. That is the novice's quarters. All novices who come to learn in the guild are housed there, even if they have homes in the city. Why? So we can make their lives misery, Daniel replied. Sonea gave him a very direct look, then snorted softly. The novices are removed from their family's influence when they come here, Rothan told her. We have to wean them off the little intrigues the houses are always indulging in. We get plenty of new novices who have never had to get out of bed before midday, Daniel added. It comes as quite a shock to them when they learn how early they have to rise for class. We'd have no hope of getting them to lessons on time if they lived at home. So, basically goes on with all of the different areas and the way that they work. And then we get a little history lesson about the Sachakan War. You can see how the city was built in concentric circles. First, a wall was erected around the remains of the old king's palace, then another around the city. The outer wall was constructed a few decades later. The old city was named the Inner Circle, and the new area was divided into the 4 quarters. The entire eastern quarter was given to the magicians in gratitude for driving out the Sachakan invaders. The decision wasn't made carelessly. The palace and inner circle drew water from the spring in those days, and building the guild around the supply reduced the chance of anyone poisoning it, as had been done during the war. So that's interesting. We get a pretty deep history lesson here, but I'm not going to get into everything. I'll just trust that if that comes up later, I'll be able to talk about it then. But for now, I'm not sure how much of that's actually going to be relevant. And she asks about it doesn't seem smart to teach magicians of other lands. What if they invade Kiralia? If we didn't allow them to join the guild, they would start their own, as they did in the past. Whether we teach them or not won't prevent an invasion, but by doing so we control what they are taught. We do not teach our own people differently, so they know they are not being treated unfairly. They wouldn't dare attack us anyway, Daniel added. Kiralians have strong magical bloodlines. We produce more magicians than any of the other races, and stronger ones. Vindo and Lans are the weakest, which is why they are not common here. We get more Lonmar and Eileen novices, but their powers are rarely impressive. The Shashakans used to be powerful magicians, but the war ended that, leaving us the most powerful nation in the region. So that's interesting. Not entirely sure how I feel about that. That they are kind of hands down considered the most powerful in the region, because it feels so easy for them to not really have an enemy that they know of, at least, that they need to be aware of. But okay, that's fine. Not a big deal. So the last chapter that I covered is 24 unanswered questions. And this is when Daniel talks to Lorelyn by themselves. I received a message from the thief last night. He asked if we knew of the whereabouts of a man who was Sonea's companion while she was hiding from us. I thought it might be that young man who tried to rescue her. Lorelyn nodded. The High Lord received a similar inquiry. Daniel blinked in surprise. The thief contacted him directly? Yes, a Karen has assured Goran that he will let him know if he finds the man. And then the, sort of alarm that this is somebody that was here and then he disappeared. That's a little strange. He came to visit. But they don't really seem to be worried about it. It's more just that's weird. I wonder what could have happened. And they sort of leave it there. He considered the thief's message again. There had been an undertone of accusation in the letter, as if Goran suspected that the guild was responsible for the man's disappearance. Daniel did not believe that the thief would blame the guild for his problems as easily as the average Dwell did, or that he would contact the High Lord if he didn't have good reason to. So Goran must believe the guild was capable of finding the man for them. Daniel chuckled as the irony of the situation occurred to him. The thieves had helped the guild find Sonea. Now they wanted the same kind of favor in return. He wondered if they would offer as large a reward. But why did Goran think the guild knew where the man was? If Goran thought that Sonea knew where her friend was, why hadn't he contacted her directly? Did he believe she would not tell them? The thieves had sold her to the guild, after all. I found that to be surprising, that he says the thieves had sold her to the guild. The thieves didn't do any such thing, and I don't know what the thieves did to make him think that they upheld their end of the deal. Because they find Sonea fleeing as she's like breaking buildings down. It's purely by accident. Nobody came to him, as far as we know, and said, hey, here she is. There's no indication whatsoever that they helped the magicians to find her or anything. So I don't really know why he still believes. If anything, the fact that she was hiding underground so much of the time that they were looking for her and they couldn't find her and she seemed to constantly be on the move would to me be evidence that they were helping her, because there's no way that she moves around that much in their territory and they aren't aware of it and they don't report it. So unless Fergun was working alone and Goran had a different goal, maybe they're not like on the same team. I don't know, but I just thought that was a weird thing. He could ask Sonea if she knew what was going on, but if she didn't know that her friend was missing, the news might upset her. She might suspect the guild of causing her friend's disappearance. It could ruin all that Rothan had achieved. Daniel, listen, thank you. I appreciate you fucking thinking that through and coming to that very logical conclusion. You are a good man and a respectable character, and I appreciate you. Much respect. Because as soon as he started to think that, and I was like, if he asks her, this is going to ruin everything. And I was so relieved that that had occurred to him. So this is when a familiar face appeared among the novices before him. Daniel felt a small twinge of dread, but Fergun did not look up. Instead, the warrior hurried past and turned into a side passage. Surprised, Daniel stopped. What could have absorbed Fergun so completely that he had not even noticed his old foe? Moving back down the corridor, Daniel peered down the side passage and caught a glimpse of red robes before the warrior turned another corner. Fergun had been carrying something. Daniel hovered at the passage entrance, tempted to follow. As a novice, he would have seized any opportunity to discover any of Fergun's little secrets. But he wasn't a novice anymore, and Fergun had won that war long ago. Shrugging, he started back down the corridor toward Rothan's classroom. Lessons were due to start in less than 5 minutes, and he had no time for spying. Oh, I wish that you had gone and checked up on this whole thing, Daniel. Maybe if he sees him acting weird again, he will do something. But it bummed me out that he thought of the fact that Cery was missing and how suspicious that was, and then sees Fergun acting suspicious, and he does not put those two things together. And that is not to say that the writing is bad. And that's not what I mean. I mean, like, as a character, he did not tie those two things together at all. And I wish that he had, but there really isn't a good reason for him to do that yet. So it is believable to me that he wouldn't make that association. It's just, I just wanted him to. Because frankly, fuck Fergun and fuck everything about him. Am I wrong? No, I'm not. So, Lorlan comes to visit Sonea. And it's a kind of strained conversation, only because he is so formal and he's trying so hard to, like, get on her good side sounds too obsequious. He's trying to make her feel comfortable, but he's doing it in such a, like, desperate, overt way, despite his formality, that it's kind of tough. So when she tells him that she doesn't want to join and that she wants to, like, go back to her family and friends, he says, "We will regret losing someone of such potential. Are you sure you want to give up your powers?" "Give up my powers?" she repeated slowly, glancing at Rothan. "That is not how Rothan described it." The administrator's eyebrows rose. "What has he told you?" "That I won't be able to use them because I won't know how." "Do you believe you could teach yourself?" She paused. "Could I?" "No, the administrator smiled. What Rothan has told you is true, but knowing how the success of your lessons depended on maintaining trust between you, he has left it to me to explain the laws regarding the release of magicians from the guild. The law states that every man and woman whose powers are active must either join the guild or have his or her powers blocked. Blocking can't be done until a full control is established, but once in place, it effectively prevents a magician from using magic in any way. So Rothan had been keeping something from her. Yet she understood why he had. The knowledge that magicians were going to meddle with her mind would not have made it easy for her to trust him. Fergun had been right, though. "Do you have any questions, Sonea?" Lorlin asked. "This blocking isn't uncomfortable?" He shook his head. "You won't feel anything. There's a sensation of resistance if you try to perform magic, but it is not painful. Since you are not used to using magic, I doubt you'll even notice the block at all. I'm not going to try and talk you into staying. I only wish you to know there is a place here for you if you want it. Do you have any other questions?" So yeah, she gets some information here. She also gets information earlier when they're meeting with Daniel about the guardianship thing. So she's getting some confirmation that Fergun did tell her the truth about things. But as she's getting that information, she also gets a weird, understanding of why Rothan might keep certain things from her, or why they may not have come up yet. So it's not like finding out that, oh, he was lying to me, is the nail in Rothan's coffin at all. In fact, she's showing remarkable maturity in how she's trying to see his perspective on why he may not have told her about this yet. So in that sense, I really respect her. So they decide to take a walk outside. And there's snow and it's chilly, but he's able to make this sort of bubble of warmth that they can walk around in and not feel it too much. Then they start to head towards, and this is interesting. It's interesting both because, this is the first time we're hearing about how this works, but also to me because of how uneasy Daniel is about it. So before that happens, what I'm talking about very obliquely here, we find out what the different vows are that magicians make. There are two, the novice's vow and the magician's vow. One is made when novices enter the guild, the other is made at graduation. The novice's vow never to deliberately harm another man or woman unless in defense of the allied lands, and to obey the rules of the guild, to obey the laws of the king, and orders of any magician unless those orders involve breaking a law, and to never use magic unless instructed by a magician. And I'm trying to find exactly because there's a break there. The first two parts of the magician's vow are the same, but the third part changes to be a pledge to serve the ruler of one's own land, and the fourth becomes a promise to never use evil forms of magic. What is the punishment if a magician breaks the vow? That depends on how it was broken, which land the magician lives in, and the judgment of their ruler. The worst penalty is death, which is reserved for murderers. Otherwise, the strongest punishment is exile. You block the magician's powers and send them away. Yes, none of the allied lands will accept them. It was part of the agreement. So that makes her kind of a little impressed with the fact that Fergun was willing to take this risk for her in the face of that sort of punishment, which I don't know if he really is. So I don't know if he deserves that feeling of respect from her. But so the old cemetery. This is the thing. This is such a weird, what he says about what happens to them just really shocked me a little bit. A magician 4 centuries ago described his magic as a constant companion. It can be a helpful friend or a deadly adversary. Think of everything you have learned about magic and control. Your powers develop naturally, but for most of us, we need to have our abilities triggered by another magician. Once that is done, we are bound by the demands of our powers for the rest of our lives. We have to learn to control them. We have to maintain that control. If we don't, our magic will eventually destroy us. For all of us, at the moment of our death, our grasp over our power ends, and the remaining magic within us is released. We are literally consumed by it. She had thought she would be rid of magic once she had learned control, but now she knew that she would never be free of it. No matter what she did, it would always be there. One day in some house in the slums, she would just flare out of existence. If we die a natural death, this is rarely a problem, Rothan added. The strength of our power usually fades in our last years. If our death is unnatural, there's an old saying, it takes a fool, a martyr, or a genius to murder a magician. Looking at Daniel, she suddenly understood his discomfort. It was not the presence of the dead that disturbed him, but the reminder of what was going to happen to him when he died. But he had chosen this life, she reminded herself. She hadn't, and neither had Fergun. She wondered how many magicians entered the guild reluctantly. Surprised by her newfound sympathy, she looked down at the headstone. So why are the graves here? Rothan shrugged. We have no idea. They shouldn't be. Many of our historians believe that these magicians drained all their power once they knew they were dying, then made sure they died at the point of exhaustion by stabbing themselves or taking poison. We know they chose other magicians to be attendants at their death, perhaps making sure they died at the right moment. So, that's crazy. And I just can't, that's a pretty big thing to know. That, the thing that makes you different and stronger in some ways is also going to kill you. And that's sort of an inevitability. Yikes. But that's a really cool detail, and I don't think I've seen anything like that before in anything that I've read. I'm sure it's out there, but I just haven't. So I think that's a really cool idea. So that's about it. They walk around and talk about that a bit more, and then they decide that it's time to go inside and for Daniel to come to dinner. So is there anything anybody in the audience wanted to ask me before I wrap this up? Because I have to head off and do the live watch of Veronica Mars in a moment. I should check right now to see when the next episode of this is scheduled, if there is a scheduled one yet, because I really want to know. It looks like next week, the 22nd, is the next one, which is Monday. So, because I'm just dying to know what the hell happens with Cery, because I just can't figure that one out. All right, it looks like no questions. So thank you guys so much for coming. Oh, Martin just came through. So how has your opinion of the guild changed from the start of the series to now? It seems a lot more low-key than I expected, because, the way that they were patrolling the streets, they really seemed like some sort of, magical secret police. But it turns out that's not their main deal, really. And so the impression that I got initially was much more militant, and it turns out that they're much more like a college, which was very unexpected. So yeah, and just that there's so much more of a variety of thought there as well, because militant goes hand in hand with being a little bit brainwashed. And I mean that not in a incredibly detrimental way as it can, but there is a certain focus and singleness of mind that goes with being in the military that I kind of expected them to have, and they do not. So I found that to be surprising as well, that they all have very different opinions and varied ways of handling things. So yeah, I think that's it. All right. Well, thank you again to Ashleigh for commissioning this episode. Thank you to Martin and to Linda for being here this afternoon. And thank you all so much for listening. I will see you again soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.